G'day, mate. 40 here. We're on the verge of a major escalation with Iran, and I'm not sure why that's not getting more coverage. Right? We're withdrawing embassies, personnel from the Middle East. We're buckling down for what's going on, and I don't get why this isn't the top story right now. But yeah, let's talk about Iran. Mark Halperin's all over
Talk
it.
about Iran. Okay, this is a hugely undercovered story, and I was thinking about it on my own, and then Matthew Bartlett texted me some stuff, and realized why I'm having trouble with theirs, Matthew. So let's review the bidding. Here's Matthew. Matthew, welcome in. Matthew, amongst other things, besides having deep New Hampshire ruts, you worked in the State Department. Am I right?
Yeah, precisely, Mark. Was a Trump State Department appointee first term.
Yeah. So over the weekend, the president unexpectedly went to Camp David from New Jersey, not back to the White House, but to Camp David. And it was reported, I believe, first by Axios that he went there to have meetings with his national security team, including the vice president and all the other likely suspects, to talk about Iran. And we know that today, put up number 18, please. The U.S. State Department announced that they were withdrawing all diplomats from Iraq. And there's saber rattling coming from Tehran, from the foreign minister, I believe, some senior official in the Iranian government. And there's also a great deal of concern that the talks for a nuclear accord are falling apart. And the president, in a recent interview, expressed pessimism about the prospect of striking this nuclear deal. And of course, as you all know, this also comes amid lots of conversation about the possibility that Israel, after years and years of thinking about it, talking about it, planning for it, will engage in a military strike against Iran. Many people, or experts, say Iran is much closer to a nuclear device than they've ever been. And no president in the last 5 has had any policy but that Iran may not develop a nuclear capability. And I'll add this, although it's been conventional wisdom for a long time that it's impossible really to strike their nuclear capability without causing World War III or nuclear fallout all over the region that would alienate the West and Israel from young Arabs and Palestinians across the region, Muslims across the region. There's some talk that Israel might now have a plan to do this in a way that would minimize the blowback. Don't know what that would be, but there's talk of that. So the reason I wanted Matthew to come on, and the reason I'm leading with this, we'll get to California in a minute, is I got a lot of sources who've been emailing me and texting me for the last 2 days saying, watch this. Some keying off of Camp David, some keying off of other stuff. So I just want to, if you look at the media right now, you'll see there's some talk about the State Department announcement today, some talk about trouble in the talks, but I've not heard, now is that coming from you, Matthew? Is that loud sound?
Some puzzle pieces. And today grew increasingly interesting and increasingly heightened even in the region. As you said, the entire national security apparatus was in Camp David. There were scant reports, but some said that, there was a call to Bibi afterwards. Then you saw President Trump on the New York Post podcast stating that he was losing patience with Iran. And then you go back to, again, reporting that Mark Levine went to the White House for a meeting to encourage a strike against Iran, contrary to what Tucker Carlson had been promoting. Then today, yes, you saw, Matt Lee of the AP, just an incredible reporter, saying that, the talks, that Iran had not responded to the proposals, that the talks this weekend in Oman were off. You saw the Free Beacon actually report that Iran has test fired a ballistic missile.
Okay, so based on what I know, I don't like the idea of attacking Iran. So based on my knowledge, the sources available to me, which are also available to you, on the face of it, this seems like a terrible idea. But I got to suspect that the President of the United States has access to more information than I do.
You mentioned John Hudson of the Washington Post, his reporting that the region is looking to potentially move or evacuate people out of U.S. bases. But the most interesting nugget that I saw today was Tom Cotton's tweet. Pete Hegseth was on the Hill today. His testimony, Tom Cotton's tweet said today, SecDef, Pete Hegseth confirmed that Iran's terrorist regime is actively working towards a nuclear weapon. For the sake of our national security, the security of our allies, and millions of civilians in the region, this cannot be allowed to happen. So this all seems to be moving towards a much more potentially, kinetic response. As you said, probably underreported, but it seems as if very heightened. I don't have any special information. I'm no longer at the State Department, but I did speak with some former colleagues who just said that the situation is, quote, getting tight.
Yeah, Matthew, brilliant connection of the dots. And again, most of what you've cited is publicly available, but you've connected it brilliantly. And you and I are both hearing from people. There seems to be something going on now. I cannot count on the fingers of both hands the number of times in the last 15 years I've been told by sources Iran is about to explode. This is about to happen. Israel's going to attack, or Iran's going to attack. So we're not here to be ahead of the information. We're not here to be alarmist, but we are here to put on your radar that something's happening. And although it's only one of the many things Matthew cited, Donald Trump going from New Jersey, not back to the White House, but to Camp David, it's just not normal behavior for him. There's some reason why they all felt they had to convene at Camp David. So we'll keep tracking it. I'm going to make not a prediction, but I'll tell you it's a possibility. Our conversation right here by the bottom of the hour at the end of the program may yield some source information, may pry loose a little bit more. So stand by for that. Matthew, thank you for joining.
Okay, comment on X that they had to make Trump Fox News style videos for Trump's intelligence briefings because he can't read. Well, I guarantee you that he can read, but he may prefer to process information in video format. And we had senile President Joe Biden for years. So were you horrified by that? Joe Biden wasn't able to do much intellectual labor much of the time. I mean, he was clearly out of it. Donald Trump is clearly far more physically and mentally capable than Joe Biden. I assume that you're a big Joe Biden fan. And Joe Biden was a senile wreck much of the time. And on the other hand, Joe Biden's national security team were very well educated. They read books. They wrote papers. And they were the biggest disaster for an American foreign policy team in memory. I can't think of any American foreign policy team that was worse than the Biden administration. Getting us into an unnecessary conflict in Iran, in Ukraine, having Joe Biden fly to Israel immediately after October 7 to embrace Bibi Netanyahu. The Joe Biden foreign policy team did massive blunder after massive blunder. The damage that our support and guidance of Ukraine to destroy much of Russia's nuclear triad, you don't think that there could be repercussions when the United States assists and makes possible and directs the destruction of much of Russia's nuclear triad? Do you realize how dramatically we've escalated the chances of a nuclear war? And unfortunately, this was under the Trump administration. But we're in this mess because the Biden administration got the United States so deeply into the war with Russia, provoked Russia by continuing to march the borders of NATO up to Russia's borders and making this kind of blowback, making it absolutely essential for Russia to see, hey, we've got to go to war and smash Ukraine because we can't allow our enemies to march out to the border. But anyway, the Joe Biden foreign policy team was incredibly cultured, incredibly well educated, incredibly well read, and the most disastrous, the worst foreign policy team in terms of their net effect that we have ever seen. So I will judge Donald Trump by what he does, not on whether he takes national security briefings in part through videos.
The Jesse Waters prime time tonight. Coast-to-coast riots, but Democrats in denial.
I had never thought in my life that I would be seeing this sort of terrorism attack on our citizens.
I can throw rubber projectiles with this doohickey right here, about 100 miles an hour. A rock? That'll shatter your skull. I want to go to war with federal agents.
Close the border and open the insane asylums.
If it's about doing it the right way, why the are we arresting people?
I have no hard feelings. You know, I was really surprised that happened.
Are Trump and Elon back?
He feels very badly.
Plus,
and I got the shirt, but I ain't wearing the shirt when we go out. This is the shirt before the shirt.
LA's rioting, our flags are burning, and Democrats are struggling to pick a side. Yesterday, they said it was the Mexican-American War all over again, and they wanted us to give California back. Now they say it's the Civil War.
I remember a few stand-ups ago when I talked about what terrorism looks like. This is it. There should be no question to what our country would look like had the Confederacy won. We're seeing it on full display.
The Civil War started when Democrats resisted federal law and attacked federal troops. Isn't that how the LA riots started? I guess Democrats are going back to their roots. And they're looking for a general. Gavin Newsom's hopping on his high horse and leading the charge.
California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived.
Hiding in a bunker, releasing pre-recorded videos, saying democracy's under assault. Who does that remind me of? The big guy. Gavin's just emasculated because Trump reached into his state and ordered his guard to protect the people he couldn't or wouldn't. ICE.
So these hysterical Democratic reactions that Donald Trump is planning on installing martial law across the country, it reminds me of Republican hysterical reactions to COVID lockdowns. Remember how hysterical conservatives were getting about how this was the Great Reset and this would be a new level of government control in our lives that wouldn't end. And yet when we got the vaccines, almost all the COVID restrictions started backing off, and now they're completely gone. And so Republican hysteria over its authoritarian Great Reset rule over COVID restrictions, right, had no basis in fact, because the COVID restrictions went away when we got vaccines. So too, this Democratic Party hysteria over Donald Trump and sending National Guard troops to quell riots in Los Angeles seems entirely misplaced to me, right? It just seems absurd and just silly.
Raids are democracy. That's what the country voted for. Trump's ambassador to Hollywood has had enough of the hair grease.
You're a fool blaming Trump. What are you doing for this destruction of these animals destroying Los Angeles? Are you there talking calmly with them, you fool? They would burn you down like they're burning the cars and the American flag with no regard for humanity. This is not about Trump. This is about protecting the people from these animals and criminals trying to destroy us. And our police force, are they supposed to stand there, let rocks hit them and kill them? Who's going to save them? You? You're a disgrace. You're nothing but a lying dog for the hopes of becoming the president one day.
Gavin whining about democracy is exactly what got Democrats shellacked last year. The dictator hoax didn't fly. What did? Sovereignty. Democrats think they lost because of trans. They really lost because of Biden migrants. The LA riots have nothing to do with Donald Trump. He lives in D.C. He didn't melt Waymos and loot sushi joints. Illegals are firebombing the LA freeway, and Democrats are calling Trump the terrorist.
This is absolutely unconscionable, what's going on. I had never thought in my life that I would be...
Oh, but it's only 1% of Los Angeles, right? You have a bullet go through 1% of your brain or your heart or some other vital artery, you're dead, right? These downtown Los Angeles freeways, right, is one of the vital veins, one of the vital arteries for Los Angeles, and it was shut down by these riots. Thousands of people couldn't get to where they needed to go. People couldn't get to their jobs, couldn't get to their families, right? Couldn't conduct a normal life because of these riots. And so that only took up about 1% of the total space in Los Angeles it just seems such a silly argument. Bullets only went through about 1 or 2% of President John Kennedy's body, and yet they managed to kill him, right? 1% of your body suffering an impact, right, in the right place, and you'll be dead. And the devastation to Los Angeles from shutting down its freeways and providing businesses with more and more excuses to shut down in downtown LA and to render life as we know it, to render normal life increasingly difficult or impossible for thousands of Angelinos. That seems like a pretty serious deal to me.
Seeing this sort of disruption and this sort of terrorism attack on our citizens, on our community.
The National Guard's not the one torching cars and waving Mexican flags around on dirt bikes. They called ICE the Gestapo, the police Nazis, and the
Right. If these people vote, they vote for Kamala Harris, they vote for Gavin Newsom, they vote for the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass. These are Democratic Party voters who are assaulting police, who are shutting down freeways, who are destroying life for normal, law-abiding citizens.
National Guard terrorists. These politicians are actually firebombing their own party. Trump's the only one doing the job.
Are you going to arrest Gavin Newsom?
Well, he's not doing a good job. You know, arrest, what does that mean? He's not doing a good job.
Charge him?
Well, in theory, you could, I guess. You know, it's almost like a dissipation of duty. Nobody's ever seen anything like that.
Arrest. What does that mean? Well, it means what they did to him. Trump's not going to give Gavin a mugshot. It would make him the nominee. And Republicans...
Look, the quality of life in the United States has dropped dramatically since 2020. The massive amount of crime. And you see now why there's a very good reason to believe that much of crime in Los Angeles and other Democratic strongholds is vastly unreported. Right? We had this massive mayhem going on in Los Angeles, and there were about 17 arrests. Right? Overall, the LAPD did absolutely everything they could not to arrest people. Right? They arrested the fewest number of people as possible. So in many Democratic strongholds, they don't want to arrest anyone but the most heinous or people who might be Republicans. Right? They want their voters to have guns. Right? They want illegals to have guns. They want their pet groups to have guns, but they don't want law-abiding conservatives and Republicans to have guns. This is John Rocker, right? The former baseball pitcher. This is him describing New York City in 1999. And when he talked about New York City in 1999, most of America was not like this, but Pericles notes on X. However, in 2025, the description increasingly fits large parts of this country. When asked if he'd ever play for the Mets and the Yankees, I'd retire first. It's the most hectic, nerve-wracking city. Imagine having to take the 7 train to the ballpark, looking like you're riding through Beirut next to some kid with purple hair, next to some queer with AIDS, right next to some dude who just got out of jail for the 4th time, right next to some 20-year-old mom with 4 kids. It's depressing. The biggest thing I didn't like about New York are the foreigners. You can walk an entire block in Times Square and not hear anybody speaking English. Right, half the population in Los Angeles can't speak English. Right, about half of Latinos in the United States are not literate in English. Right, there are problems. Right, Asians, Koreans, Vietnamese, Indians, Russians, Spanish people, everything up there. How the hell did they get in this country? And now that's what it's like throughout much of America, thanks to unchecked levels of immigration, legal and illegal.
Would rather run against AOC. Democrats are letting their cities burn, and they're suing the guy trying to stop it. Gavin thinks if his city burns, he just keeps blaming Trump and his numbers are going to go up. Burn down your own town for likes. That's a new one. Fetterman is now the Democrats' voice of reason.
We should have learned the lesson back in 2020. Absolutely, there was righteous outrage over what happened to George Floyd, but that never means that you can support or be quiet if there's destruction or rioting and destroying and looting.
Trump learned his lesson from 2020. He's not going to wait for Democrat governors to stop riots. He's going to put them down, this time before Americans die.
What we have is a situation in Los Angeles that was caused by gross incompetence. They didn't have the police to handle it. The police were asking us to come in. They were very late. We had to go in to save a lot of ICE officers, as you know, who were held up. They were holed up in a building, and they were being attacked. And the military went in. The National Guard went in and got them. The police weren't able, unfortunately, to move fast enough, but we moved fast enough. And while we were there, we stayed there, and we stopped tremendous destruction and death.
Maxine Waters, no relation, is telling the National Guard to shoot her in the face. Even CNN was like, seriously?
What are you going to do? You going to shoot some kid who's afraid of you and run? You going to shoot an elected official? If you shoot me, you better shoot straight.
You then also urge guardsmen not to shoot people. Is yelling at them to shoot straight if they're going to shoot you the right way to show that concern?
Well, you know, I don't know, but what I was really trying to do was to get, you know, the attention to the seriousness of what was going on.
Right, this woman has been egging on riots and crime and disorder for decades, like deeply unhappy person, just like the rioters on January 6th. Right, if you had something to lose, you would not have participated in the January 6th riots. You had to be in a moronic state of mind if you weren't just a straight out-and-out moron to have participated in the January 6th riots. And to participate in these local riots, attacking police, attacking ICE officers, throwing concrete at LA County sheriffs and other CHP. All right, you can't have anything to lose. Anyone who's got a life, anyone who's got a future, anyone who's got hopes and dreams, anyone who cares about their most important connections in their life, like their family, would not act like this. Like Maxine Waters is a deeply unhappy person. She just radiates anger and rage and unhappiness. And this is the type of behavior that you get as a result of people just unable to maintain a normal level of human connection.
Maxine Waters just admitted she's doing this all for attention. You're not supposed to say that, Ms. Waters. And the riots have gotten plenty of attention because they're riots. We're all paying attention. And while she has our attention, what's her position on the border or on crime or deportations? CNN doesn't even ask her. Everyone's looking on their phones all day and sees LA up in smoke. MSNBC says it's a cheap fake.
The facts are that Los Angeles is calming down, that there are no riots in the streets. The tale of two cities is being told by the media. We know this. We're in this business. But
Right. President John F. Kennedy, after getting shot in the head, he was calming down. He was just doing great, aside from his vital organs shutting down. Right? You just need 1% of your body to get hit a certain way, and you're dead. And you just need 1% of a city to get hit, like these riots, and it will have could have devastating consequences. Okay, the most important thing is something big is happening with regard to Iran, and it's not getting much news coverage. So I'm not sure why that is. So my main reason for supporting a military strike on Iran, says a post on X, is to prevent these Islamist thugs from obtaining nuclear weapons. Second reason for supporting it, so we can watch Tucker Carlson go into meltdown, realizing he's about to get a pay cut from Qatar. The Islamist regime of Iran and their TikTok groupies mistook Trump's diplomatic push for a deal as weakness. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The majority of Iranians think like this. Something big is about to happen. Iran will soon be free from the Islamic regime. Okay, I'm concerned we're at war with Iran. Trump's legacy hangs in the balance. Well, I don't think he's going to do it like George W. Bush. He's not going to march in and invade Iran. I don't really care if Iran and Israel fight a war. I just don't want it to affect me. We got Jeffrey Sachs saying it'd be absolutely catastrophic to go to war with Iran. Trump has a clear message with regard to Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to allow that. All right, something seems to be happening. Massive cyber attacks across the Middle East have started. Iran is attacking Kuwaiti and Jordanian military servers. Wow, Iran just posted this on X. We are ready. There's something going down. Why isn't this the lead story on all TV networks? Right, it appears that nuclear talks with Iran have collapsed. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirming today Iran's terrorist regime is actively working toward a nuclear weapon. If war breaks out with Iran, what will happen with all the Iranian-backed mosques, schools, and organizations? Right, it's amazing that mosques where the 9/11 attack was planned is still standing. And yeah, who's funding these LA riots and other riots? Israel ready to move forward with an operation into Iran. That's why U.S. personnel are being moved out of embassies in the region. Trump is taking measures to protect Americans. Things heating up in the Middle East. Anyone got any good links? Iran probably finished their bomb and our intelligence services perhaps didn't catch it. Excitement and optimism within Iran. The people are ready for this regime to fall. So a lot of people quite optimistic. American forces carrying out wide-scale deployment in Iraq. U.S. has Iran under full encirclement. U.S. ordered all embassies in striking distance of Iran across the Middle East to convene emergency action committees and send cables back to D.C. Everything the Trump administration has done regarding Iran for the past 5 months was done to be able to say sincerely they left us no choice. Okay, very important story. You would think that the big media networks will catch up to this.
Impact of pictures that people see on their TV tell a story that's not really accurate. I mean, the flames, the cars being burned, the police being thrown, concrete blocks at the police. That's been taken care of by the Los Angeles Police Department.
He said there's no riots, and then he listed everything you do in a riot. But he says it's over. But how is it over if we're covering it now for 6 nights? It went from peaceful to mostly peaceful to a riot to no more riot because the LAPD put it down. But didn't they have a lot of help from the National Guard? Yeah, they did. The View says there was never any violence.
I spoke to about 5 people that live in LA, that work in LA, and they said that these protests were very, very orderly. They weren't violent, and they occurred in about a 4-block radius.
Sunny sources say.
Yeah, well, a 4-block radius can have huge repercussions. Shutting down a major freeway interchange, right? That has huge repercussions. This focus on, just tiny 1%. Well, a hit in 1% of your body can kill you. Right? A lot of conversation about Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys dies at 82. I enjoy Beach Boys songs, but they don't move me. They're fun, but they don't resonate with me. They don't do anything for me. So the way that I react to art is with my heart, usually, and with my emotions. And I listen to Beach Boys music. I enjoy Beach Boys music, but it doesn't have any significance for me. It doesn't have any emotional depth for me. It doesn't speak to me. It's just it's nice, right? It's pleasant, but like a Kelly Clarkson or a Barry Manilow or an Air Supply, these or some of the Pet Shop Boys, right? This is the Eagles, right? A lot of their music is deep and it speaks to me and it resonates with me. The Beach Boys doesn't have any depth for me.
There was no violence. Do her sources have TVs? Late Night says it's the same thing that happens when the Lakers win.
There's no riot outside. We have more so-called unrest here when one of our teams wins a championship. But that's not what you're seeing on TV. Someone sets a fire in a garbage can, 12 camera crews go running toward it.
Since when does a mayor issue a citywide curfew because someone set a fire in a garbage can? Mayor Baz says her city isn't on fire, but the only way to stop the fire is for ICE to leave.
I think that the idea that what is going on here is chaos and we need federal intervention is just not accurate. It doesn't paint an accurate picture of what's going on here at all. And really what is going to help would be an end to the raids. For a city not to know when, where, how, or why raids take place, you can imagine that the entire population of immigrants is very unsettling.
So the city doesn't know when raids take place because...
All right, this is just such incredibly dishonest framing. The population of immigrants are unsettled. I'm an immigrant. I'm not unsettled. If you're here legally, if you're doing the right thing, you're not settled. Think about your own life. When do you have high anxiety? When do you worry that you're going to be busted? When do you worry you're going to be fired? When do you worry you're going to lose a friend? When do you worry you're going to be ostracized? When do you worry that you're going to be humiliated, destroyed, damaged, sued? When you're doing something wrong, right? When you're stepping on other people's toes, when you are going over boundaries, when you are engaged in bad behavior, when you're doing something that's blatantly illegal, immoral, unjustified, shameful, disgusting, that people will loathe you, hate you, distance themselves from you if they know what you're doing, right? That's when you feel excessive amounts of fear and anxiety and worry about ostracism, right? The people who are here legally have no fears, right? I'm an immigrant. I have no fears. But the media just talks about Trump cracking down on migrants or Alabama cracked down on migrants. Alabama did not crack down on migrants. It cracked down on illegal migrants. It's like calling people who steal break and enter into stores and commit massive amounts of theft and looting, undocumented shoppers or rapists. They're just undocumented lovers, right? If they just had a document giving them permission to have that sexual intercourse, then it wouldn't be rape. And murderers, they're just undocumented killers, right? If they were in the military and they were doing this under orders and there was sufficient documentation, right? Or that murder, it wouldn't be murder. It would be a patriotic act, right? Calling people in the country illegally undocumented migrants is such an incredibly dishonest, disingenuous framing. You are seeking to deceive, you are seeking to deny reality, and you'll be humiliated because you are at war with reality. An illegal immigrant isn't an undocumented immigrant. A rapist is not a lover without papers. A looter is not an undocumented shopper. Right? This is just such repulsive attempts to deny reality and to clothe illegal, destructive behavior that is damaging our country and destroying social trust and social cohesion, and just saying, oh, they lack documents, right? A rapist lacks documents, right? A rapist, if he had a particular document, he would not be a rapist because the document would say that it was consensual and it could be attested to. You could have someone sign and it would be a legal document and he would no longer be a rapist. Right? Is that our main problem with rapists, that they simply lack the proper documents? Is that our main problem with murderers, that they simply lack the proper documents? Because if you have the proper documents, you would not be a murderer, right? You would have evidence that what you're doing is not murder. It would just be justified homicide, is justified killing. Looting and breaking and entering, right? If you have sufficient documents, it's no longer a crime. Right? Every horrible thing that you can think of, genocide, it's no longer a crime if you have the right documents. Is that the problem with the Holocaust, that the Nazis just didn't have the right documents? Is that the problem with mass murder, mass genocide, mass torture, that they didn't have the right documents? Because if you had certain documents, right, then everything would be considered legal. Right? This fetishization of documents, and if you just did it through the proper bureaucratic procedures, and then everything would be okay. It's a war with reality. And I hate the dishonesty.
They're a sanctuary city, and you won't cooperate. Now, if ICE gives you a heads up, the riots would be bigger. They all say we should only deport criminals, but then they won't let us. When illegals get arrested, we ask LA to hold them in jail, and then they release them. Imagine how easy it would be if ICE could just walk into the LA County Jail, pick up the bad hombres, and fly them home. LA is asking for cooperation, and they're the ones not cooperating. Tampon said he didn't want the guard to come into Minneapolis after George Floyd, and in 7 days, the city was burnt to a crisp. Millions of dollars in damage, and citizens dead. Bass was going to pull a tampon and let it burn. And now she wants taxpayers to bail her out.
We are 1 year away from the World Cup. This is about beautifying our city and bringing our city together. And so I am calling on business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders to come together downtown in the next few days to talk about how we are going to clean up the city.
Whoa. If there's no chaos, what do you need to clean up? Does the entire city of LA usually come clean up after the Lakers win a championship? No. Karen Bass shouldn't have given her cops stand-down orders. Then Trump wouldn't have had to call in the Guard. And if Trump calling in the National Guard is what causes riots, how are they rioting in Seattle and New York? The Guard isn't even there. But he will call them in if he has to. Most of the country approves. Trump's up 20 points on his Guard move. Look at that. Trump's going to protect cities like women, whether they like it or not. What's the Democrats' solution besides burn, baby, burn?
So the Drudge Report is all over this Iran story. So they note that the United States is preparing Middle East evacuations of its staff, that the United Kingdom has issued a rare warning. The Central Command Chief has postponed Senate testimony. The IDF is on high alert. Tehran is testing a missile with a 2-ton warhead. Big things seem to be going down in the Middle East.
Give 20 million illegal citizenship? That's what they want, but most of them are just afraid to say it. Stephen A. smells a red wave.
The next things Republicans are going to say is, they're for lawlessness, right? They're going to show these images. They're going to say they're for lawlessness. Folks are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. And their issues of safety is going to usurp any other concerns they have. I'm talking about the voters. And before you know it, Dems are going to lose the midterms. They're not going to regain any seats in the House or the Senate. And Trump will be able to operate with relative impunity to 2028.
Tulsi Gabbard is the director of national intelligence. All right, Tulsi, if you have foreign nationals saying...
Okay, so keep an eye on this Iran story. Any developments there? That's obviously the most important story in the world right now. An old friend of mine, a good friend of mine from high school, was on the Mark Halperin
have their
show.
narratives. The Democrats continue to say Donald Trump wants to declare martial law and deport everybody's favorite seamstress. The Republicans say that the left is too tolerant of terrorism or violent acts against law enforcement. We've talked about the sort of broad issues a lot, but I'm grateful and delighted to have with us now two people who understand California better than I ever will. Here's Rob Stutzman, longtime Republican strategist and expert on everything Golden State. Rob, tell people, how long have you lived in California? Where do you live now? And as I bring our other guest in, just your overview.
Okay, so we went to high school together. He wasn't fat in high school, but Rob was always a very good social guy. Right. I never met anyone who disliked Rob Stutzman. He was always a conservative Christian. He is someone who benefits from our institutions and who knows how to play the game with institutions, who's willing to color just within the lines, to follow the direction of people more powerful than him, to make connections with people more powerful than him, and to play the conventional game. He is a passionately anti-Trump Christian conservative Republican consultant. He worked for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's all on board with immigration.
View of where you think we are with the governor, the mayor, the president, etc.
Third generation Californian, born in the South, which is why I'm a Dodger fan.
So he was 2 years below me at Placer High School, and he was the sports editor of the high school newspaper when I was the editor.
And pretty much grew up in the
And then he succeeded me as editor in 85, 86.
North, why I'm a Niner fan. Live now in Sacramento, right here in our state capital. Where we're at the moment is...
So he's pretty much lived all his life in the Sacramento area.
Interesting, as you delineated...
And he's always played within the bounds of conventional conservative Christian politics.
As with what's going on the Hill today, everyone can find the narrative they want. Each side can find their hero in this. It's almost like it's a partnership, pro wrestling partnership between Trump and Newsom, so they can give each other what they need, which is an opponent. Where it goes from here, though, I think it's very much a sense of, well, are we going to see Marines actively in the field with...
The biggest problem in this country is declining social trust and social cohesion. So his even-handed, on the one hand this, even that, it's just not apropos to reality, right? We have had dramatically plunging social trust and social cohesion in this country because of an enormous amount of crime and an enormous amount of immigration, legal and illegal. And Stutzman is a Christian and a conservative and a traditional National Review type Republican. He's down with diversity, which means the less we have in common. And as a result of all the diversity, meaning we have very little in common, half the people in Los Angeles can't speak English. All right, we have very little social trust, very little social cohesion. And unless you're particularly smart and accomplished and high achieving like the Rob Stutzmans of the world, it makes much of life in the United States a hellhole compared to what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, because primarily declining social trust and social cohesion, which exactly correlates with diversity. The more diverse we are, the less in common we have with each other, the less we trust each other, the less we cohere, the less we work together, the less we feel safe around each other, the less happy we are, the more we retreat behind walls and to watching TV and avoiding social obligations, social commitments, working together to make things better for the community. Why would you work together in a community to try to make things better when the other people don't even speak English, when you have almost nothing in common with each other? And Rob Stutzman is all on board this destruction of social trust and social cohesion. And he thinks diversity is great. and it's destroying this country so that we have nothing in common with our fellow citizens.
ICE units on enforcement actions, or...
But there is a tremendous amount of money for articulating his pro-immigration, pro-diversity point of view. All right, the people with money, the businesses with money, the NGOs with money. Right, the way to make money as a political consultant is to push the pro-diversity, pro-immigration line that he pushes. Right, there is a fantastic haul of money to make. Right, lobbying on behalf of those forces that are destroying our country. But it's really good for those who have the money and the success to keep the disorder at bay. It just sucks for normal Americans. It just destroys this country. It trashes this country. But hey, you can make a buck.
Is this going to start to calm and back down a bit? That seems to be the crux of it. The images are going to matter, right? The image.
Oh, it's just narratives and images, and it's just calming down a bit. No, it's not calming down. We used to have in Los Angeles a place where you did not need to lock your door at night. You did not need to lock your car doors, right? Into the 1960s, right? Los Angeles was overwhelmingly a law-abiding county. And that has been destroyed by the immigration and diversity that people like Rob Stutzman push, promote, lobby for, get paid for. And it's destroying our country. It's an absolute cancer. It is poison. And he has been promoting and pushing and lobbying for and endorsing and delivering this poison into the veins of the United States, in particular California.
This week is the guy waving the flag on top of, around burning cars, Mexican flag.
Right. This is just all amusing to him. He's above it all. As the country burns, he's above it all. Right. He takes the 30,000 foot level. America is crashing with declining social trust and social cohesion. And not much evidence that this can possibly turn around. We can staunch the damage. Right. But the quality of life in this country has been trashed by people like Rob Stutzman.
That's the image that the White House wants. It's a terrible image for the...
Yeah, it's just an image. It's just narrative. It's just, he's above all that stuff, right? He sees the big picture, right? As he funds, endorses, and promotes the poison of mass immigration and diversity into this country.
Democrats. But if that imagery changes a little bit to the aforementioned seamstresses, if that really starts to happen with, with Marines outside, with gun on domestic deployment.
Yeah, Marines, National Guard, that's our biggest problem in this country, right? That's the real threat, that we might have National Guard units and Marines protecting federal property. Oh my God, what kind of bloodshed is likely to occur because we have law enforcement officers, a few more law enforcement officers in downtown Los Angeles. Surely the presence of police and law enforcement officers and National Guard, that is just going to create massive bloodshed. If only we had less law enforcement. Why can't everybody just follow the lead of the LAPD, who allows thugs, criminals to get away with as much as possible, makes very few arrests as the city burns, as our freeways are stopped, as we have thugs trying to murder police, throwing concrete blocks and heavy equipment and Molotov cocktails on them. And why is anyone getting upset by this? Why can't they take the 30,000 foot view of Rob Stutzman, who's getting rich from this?
I don't know. I don't know exactly where that narrative may shift. There's no comp for it, really, in American history.
Right. All right. Thank you, Rob. And again, grateful for joining. Also grateful to Lisa McCree.
No comp for it. We have had massively declining social trust and social cohesion since the 1965 Civil Rights Act and the changing of America's immigration law, promoted by people like Rob Stutzman, who think diversity and massive immigration is wonderful because then we'll have less in common with each other. And we all know how good the quality of life is when we trash the country, we have nothing in common, we can't cohere, we can't trust each other, we have very few incentives to work together, how wonderful that is. And so we invite the world here, we invade the world with pointless invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. We spend trillions of dollars on these pointless forever wars that people like Rob Stutzman support. And then we bring it home, right? And then we bring those immigrants home, we destroy their countries, and then we invite them to this country so that they can destroy us, right? Let's bring in more people from shithole countries, right? That's Rob Stutzman's approach.
Thank you for joining. My former colleague at ABC News. I was in charge of getting her coffee and making sure her faxes were pressed nice and smooth.
And she pretends to be a journalist. This is her entire pose. She's a journalist. She's just a truth seeker. But she loves the term undocumented migrants, right? Incredibly dishonest, right? Incredibly duplicitous, incredibly sanitizing of the situation Would she call rapists undocumented lovers? Would she call looters undocumented shoppers? Would she call murderers just undocumented killers? Right? But her pose is she's just seeking the truth.
Smooth. And now Lisa lives in the Southland and host of LA Times Today on Spectrum One, covering the greater Metroplex. Lisa couldn't be happier to see.
I know you were just talking, and Rob, you brought up the military presence. You know, it is very rare that civil disturbances necessitate a military.
There are all sorts of disturbances that necessitate a military response. Tornadoes, civil rights, right? If we brought the military out to enforce the pro-diversity, right, anti-traditional American agenda, then she'd be celebrating. Rob Sussman would be celebrating how great it is that we're bringing in law enforcement and the military to enforce my pro-diversity agenda, right? She'd be cavelling. She'd be thrilled, right? If only we had another pointless war in Iraq, another forever war in Afghanistan, people like Rod Sussman would be thrilled.
Military response, right? And there was an act, it was called the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 that was specifically...
Well, yeah, so she wants to, like, these people love documents and want to pretend that they're just all about following the law. Well, Donald Trump has nationalized the National Guard, said in the National Guard, following the law, and court challenges to what Trump has done have failed. But she's very interested in the paper of all this, right? People are trying to murder cops, shutting down freeways, destroying life in downtown Los Angeles, but she's all about the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act.
Written to prevent the misuse of military powers in civilian affairs.
Right, and what could be a bigger misuse than cracking down on rioting, on murder, on disruption of freeways and streets, preventing ordinary hardworking Americans to get to school, perhaps having some spillover effects. You really think that people would be just as likely to murder, to rape, to terrorize, to beat people up, to destroy public property, to destroy private property, to loot and to steal, right? If there are U.S. Marines around, if there are National Guard units, that defies common sense. You would have to be so rabidly devoted to a particular agenda that you are in active war with reality to deny that the presence of National Guard or U.S. Marines or any other military force or law enforcement officers, that the presence doesn't have some deterrent effect on people who are bent on murder, torture, rape, destruction, theft, looting, and destroying our country. You seriously think the looter, the rapist, the murderer, the thug, right, is just as eager to get to work at raping, looting, and murdering when there are U.S. Marines around? Right, you are in such denial of reality, it is mind-boggling. But why would she be in such denial of reality? Why is Rob Stutzman in such denial of reality? Because this stupidity, this perversity that they push, these lies that they promote, right, this is the price that you have to pay for prestige. This is the price that you have to pay for having high status. You have to be willing to humiliate yourself by trafficking in lies and nonsense and perversity, right? You have to say all sorts of things that are obviously not true. So Matt Welch, very smart, very funny guy, very accomplished editor of Reason Magazine, but he has to periodically humiliate himself by saying things absolutely not true, such as, like, every immigrant group to the United States eventually assimilates to approximately the same level. Absolutely not true, right? African Americans have been in this country since at least the 17th century. Most African Americans have not assimilated, right? But he wants to live in denial. He feels obligated to say things that are completely humiliating because they are completely at odds with reality. But that's the price that you pay, and this is the price that Lisa's willing to pay, Rob Sussman's willing to pay, Matt Welch is willing to pay. All these people promoting lies, perversity, absolute nonsense, just denying what is obvious and true. Like, these people at war with reality, humiliating themselves with the ridiculous things that they say, but they're willing to pay that price to have these high status positions, from which they can then lecture us.
But it has happened over and over. Just a few years later, the military was brought into California when there was a huge...
Oh, so very rare, but it's happened over and over. Thank you, Lisa.
Huge nationwide railroad strike. And it turned out to be a huge debacle and a PR backfire for them, because what happened is once the local guards had to realize they were going to shoot their sister's husband if they, did anything because they were local. It was a debacle. But again, we've seen it again and again and again. We saw military brought out for all the civil rights, not all the civil rights, but many.
Yeah, sometimes having a bunch of law enforcement and a bunch of military troops at a place, it doesn't always work out great. But you know what we know does not work out great? In a city of high diversity, meaning that Los Angelinos have very little in common with each other, a lack of law enforcement, we know what happens then, right? We have guaranteed horrible results, deadly results. We have had a massive increase in tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths, thanks to the Black Lives Matter movement promoted by almost all of our major corporations and the mainstream media, by people like Lisa, resulting in tens of thousands of additional deaths, right? That's what we get when we incentivize the law enforcement to back off from enforcing the law. And we see how weak the LAPD are with regard to enforcing the law, because the LAPD chief seems like a decent bloke, but all the incentives on him from the left, which controls Los Angeles politics, and they don't want him to enforce the law against their people, who are the ones who are rioting.
Civil rights actions in the mid-20th century. Of course, in 1965, we had the Watts riots here in Los Angeles. The military came, and there were 30 people killed, 2/3 of them by police and guard. We had the
Yeah, and they were killed for no reason, right? They were just sitting there being good Samaritans and reading the Bible and helping people, and the military just killed them for no reason, right? I don't buy it, all right? The military and the police were protecting themselves against thugs, looters, rapists, and murderers, right, who are intent on doing harm to innocent people. And when these people intent on murdering got stopped, and sometimes the only way you can stop a murderer is by killing them, but she remembers, her heart bleeds for these dead thugs from the Watts riots.
Rodney King protests in 1992. And by the way, military greatly wanted here. I mean, things were out of control.
And comment in the chat, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Yes, because whenever people have a choice, they overwhelmingly choose to segregate themselves, right? Particularly when people have kids, when people have to be serious, when people are married, when people are building up businesses, right? When people have something to lose, they overwhelmingly choose to segregate themselves whenever they have that opportunity. That is how it has always been in human history. That is how it is now. That is likely how it will always be. People naturally segregate themselves to people like themselves.
On the streets of LA. And then we remember, Kent State, right? When the military is called into a college campus.
Yeah, amazing. Military is called into a college campus. The military gets attacked by these kids and they fire back. It's a really stupid, dumb, bad, idiotic idea to attack people who have guns. Right? Don't do that. If you do it, you're taking your life in your hand.
It was for Vietnam protest and 4 dead in Ohio, as Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young wrote. So those are times when it's happened before.
Yeah, and how many dead would we have had if the National Guard didn't fire? How many dead would we have had in the Watts riots if the police and the military didn't fire? Right, she focuses on the dead from the military and the police taking action. How many thousands of people would we have dead if law enforcement backed off in the face of widespread looting, thuggery, murder, torture, rape?
Does this event rise to that occasion?
We had a major freeway interchange blocked off, right? We had thugs trying to murder CHP officers, right? And she's going to say, oh, it's only 1% of Los Angeles. Well, a blow to 1% of her body would kill her. Would she be down with that? Is there anyone that she cares about? Would she be down with them receiving just a blow to 1% of their body, which would kill them? Right? You have millions of dollars of damage done from this rioting in just 1% of Los Angeles. I just don't see how this 1% argument is a particularly strong one.
And because of social media, people are consuming tiny little snippets of a one.
Oh, it's just social media, right? Thousands of people couldn't get to their work, couldn't get to their family, couldn't get to their loved ones, couldn't get to an ER, right? Because thugs took over a major freeway interchange. People couldn't get to work all across this country because of these thugs.
Square mile area in downtown LA. And hey, yeah, nobody wants to see innocent Waymos, I will say. Innocent.
Nobody wants to see them. Plenty of people want to see that. And the media said, hey, these are just people gathering around these burning cars and they're just having a fun time. And what a disaster it would be if law enforcement stopped in there and stopped the burning of cars.
Waymo set ablaze, right? And graffiti.
She thinks it's funny.
All over the buildings in downtown, like downtown doesn't have enough problems. Cinder bombs being thrown at sheriff's vehicles, not okay. And there are real questions about why are people, waving Mexican flags.
Sunday night, the Los Angeles PD police chief stated that his forces were overwhelmed and could do with help. But does she repeat that? No, she denies it. She says the very opposite of what the LAPD chief said. If you just looked at what was happening with the LAPD on Sunday, you saw that they were clearly overwhelmed. Like, what kind of sane person doesn't want law enforcement backup when your biggest police force in the city of Los Angeles, right, is overwhelmed? What sane person says, hey, let's not have any backup. Let's just allow the thugs to rule?
If, that offends people. So these images are being pumped out and making the whole city look aflame. It's a 500 square mile city. This is 1 square mile. And there are a couple of...
And did you know that the nuclear weapons dropped on Japan took up less than 0.1% of Japan? And yet people make such a big deal of these nuclear weapons. Why? Did you know that the concentration camps took up less than 0.1% of space in Europe? And yet people keep talking about the Holocaust, but there wasn't any Holocaust going on in 99.9% of Europe. Right? She would never dare to make that analogy. She'd never dare. But when it comes to Trump derangement syndrome, people love to go to war with reality.
Little pop-ups in Paramount and Compton. But again,
just little pop-ups. No big deal. Just destroying the quality of life and providing more and more incentives for businesses to shut down and move away.
Bringing in that sort of military force, there's real questions about it. And I do worry somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah, brilliant.
Start off, if Gavin Newsom wanted to take on Donald Trump and loves the attention, he has 100% gotten it. Take a look here. Google searches of Gavin Newsom with Donald Trump. Get this up. 9,700% versus a week ago. More folks are Googling Gavin Newsom's name with Donald Trump than ever before in Google searches dating all the way back since 2004. Donald Trump was able to make a name for himself through The Apprentice, through all of his business ventures. He is now making a name for Gavin Newsom, who seems more than willing to relish in this fight.
What are the numbers?
Enough of Harry. Lisa, how...
Yeah, so Gavin Newsom thinks this is good for him. It's terrible for California. It's terrible for LA. But Gavin thinks it's good for his political prospects.
How would you appraise how the governor's doing for his constituents? Forget the politics in 2028. How do you think he's doing for his constituents?
But you can't forget the politics because he's a politician. And it's all politics, images and all that. Gavin Newsom is doing what he needs to do. Karen Bass is doing, she has to stand up for the city.
They're doing what they need to do. So apparently, according to Lisa, what they need to do has nothing to do with the welfare of Californians, the safety of people in Los Angeles, the smooth operation of vital infrastructure, right? What these politicians have to do has nothing to do with that.
City of LA and say, hey, this is an overreaction. I honestly left it in the hands of sheriffs and police who were trained in civil disobedience.
So let me rewind this.
Power to manipulate. State Guard has been federalized by the presidency. It changes your power to manipulate it. So listen, I just think everybody wishes that they'd left it in the hands of sheriffs and police who.
Right. So the Los Angeles police chief on Sunday night clearly stated that his forces were overwhelmed and that they could do with help. They could do with backup. They could benefit from the National Guard. Right. And so everybody wishes that they leave it in the hands of an overwhelmed police force. Yeah. Those who want rioting and looting and thuggery to burn out of control, they wish it. Right. She might wish it. Right. But any sane Los Angelino does not wish it. Right. The LAPD chief, very clear Sunday night that his forces were overwhelmed and that he would benefit from extra forces.
Who were trained in civil disobedience rather than military, because I do worry about collateral damage.
All right.
Right. We need them trained in civil disobedience so that they don't start mistakenly arresting people committing crimes. Right. That's what she means by trained in civil disobedience, because in democratic-run cities, the police are trained to deal with civil disobedience and not arrest people. And God forbid that we start having law enforcement officers or military or National Guard start arresting people for committing crimes. How horrible would that be?
All right, Rob, here is Donald Trump in an interview with Miranda Devine, who will be amongst my guests on.
It doesn't go to San Francisco or Los Angeles. It's way short because it was too expensive to go in. The whole thing is crazy. It is the worst run, one of the worst run places. We have a lot of them. In almost all cases run by Democrats.
Rob, how do you feel about the conventional wisdom that within California politics and for 2028, being at war with Donald Trump is great for Gavin Newsom?
I think it's great for him for his party politics. Whether it's for 28 or not, I don't know, but it's a party that hasn't had a leader. It's been rudderless since the election. And, the base wants resistance. Keep in mind, this is a guy that, 8 weeks ago is broing out with MAGA media figures on his podcast, absolutely pissing off his base. But he's been thrust into these circumstances, and I think he is playing politics.
Trump administration was removing violent, criminal, illegal aliens from the city. These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted "Death to ICE," and spray-painted anti-American slogans on buildings. But President Trump will never allow mob rule to prevail in America. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility. Democrats like Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass shamefully failed to meet their sworn obligations to their citizens. They didn't have the courage to do the right thing and protect law-abiding Californians from rioters. That's why President Trump deployed the National Guard and mobilized Marines to end the chaos and restore law and order. The mob violence is being stomped out.
My first question. Go ahead.
But no, I have a question for Rob. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm not going to do the whataboutism about January 6th. We all know it in the back of our heads. Okay. But Rob, I want to ask you, the Dodgers downtown over the weekend, I've seen worse when the
Oh, yeah, when the Lakers win. But you don't have law enforcement officers generally attacked there. All right. What started all this is that ICE officers were attacked, and the LAPD apparently took 2 hours to try to protect them. All right. The reason that January 6th was such a big deal is it took place in the political heart of the United States of America. Right. If it had taken place in a cornfield in rural Iowa, January 6th wouldn't have been such a big deal. And yeah, there are riots and cars being burned after sports celebrations, but you don't usually have the crowd directing its ire primarily at law enforcement officers. That's the difference, right? It's all context. It's all where it's happening, how it's happening, and against whom is it happening, right? It seems to me obvious, but Lisa doesn't really get it.
Dodgers blow a playoff, right? I mean,
or when the Lakers win. Yeah.
Or when the Lakers win. There's this little tiny crazy.
Yeah, she thinks it's no big deal to have these kind of riots, freeway interchanges blocked, gangs trying to murder police officers, right? Massive graffiti, destruction. She thinks it's nothing.
Amount of people, right? Like who take to the streets. Not to say there's not righteous anger and indignation about these raids, especially people who are with paper.
Yeah. She thinks that these raids are righteous, right? People with paper, right? People who are here in the country legally have nothing to fear, right? It's only people who are in the country illegally, and the Secretary of State has the right to decide if someone who is here legally but is not a citizen, but is here on a green card, perhaps they lied on their application, but they're now deemed a threat to the security of the United States of America, get rid of them. That does not apply to lawful green card holders who are not a threat, right? 99.9% of green card holders in the United States are not frightened that Marco Rubio decides that various pro-terror, pro-Hamas agitators should not be in this country.
Or are here on certain visas or student visas get swept up, which it seems like they are. But in terms of...
Yeah, they get swept up if they're promoting terrorism. They're pushing terror. They're pushing Hamas. Yeah, they get swept up because they are a national security threat to this country. They don't have American citizen First Amendment privileges, right? If they want to promote terror, let them go promote it somewhere else.
Painting it as this is as bad as January 6th, it's just not true. And I think that everybody agrees that the Democrats blew it by not going after low-hanging fruit. Why didn't the Democrats close the border? Why didn't the Democrats deport known criminals? Why wasn't that a priority? I mean, there was low-hanging fruit they could have taken, and now they're, listen, nobody wants to go from, yeah, we're deporting, as Karen Bass said, hardened criminals to chasing down a drywaller in a Home Depot parking lot.
Wait, she just said nobody wants to go from deporting hardened criminals to chasing down a drywaller in a Home Depot parking lot. If that drywaller is in the country illegally and we don't know anything about his criminal record or what gangs he's been in or who he really is and who he associates with, I don't want anyone in this country who's here illegally. So when she says nobody wants to deport people in this country illegally, I want to deport people in this country illegally, and I want to start with the dreamers. I don't want to start with the hardened criminals. Let's start with the bloody dreamers and their arrogance that they are such a gift to this country. I agree with Ann Coulter. Let's deport the dreamers first, then go after the hardened criminals, and then let's deport everyone who's in this country illegally, because for every one person who you deport from this country who's here illegally, another 100 will self-deport. So Mark Halperin and the media elite talk about, we'll never be able to deport 20 million people. You only have to deport maybe 50,000 people, and 20 million people will leave. All right? And we deported approximately 1 million in the 1950s under the Eisenhower administration, and the price of lettuce did not go to $15 an hour. Right? It did not have a massive distorting effect on the economy when Operation Wetback deported 1 million illegals in this country. Right, let's have another Operation Wetback.
But what I miss is that, Congress has dropped the ball for decades now on fixing this immigration problem, and everybody's going like this, and nobody's looking at them, So that's my rant,
Okay.
Rob. You go.
Rob, go.
Well, Levitt said something in her rant. It was interesting. She had to read that. You'd think she could just recite that. She talked about criminals, that they were removing criminals from the streets. That's the narrative I think that they may be starting to.
Every person in this country who is here illegally is a criminal. They need to be removed.
Over to play their hand on. The head of the Western Agricultural Association, represents the big farmers, said yesterday his members are starting to report of detention amongst their workforce. If this goes beyond gangsters and criminals, as Congressman Valadeo was saying yesterday, as Congressman Gonzalez of Texas was saying yesterday, hey, focus on the criminals and the gangsters. If it goes beyond that, the visuals change, and I think the White House risks this narrative.
Absolutely.
If they're in this country illegally, they need to be deported. Go, 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 go. Get the hell out of here.
You're right, Rob. They've rolled out the same 8 people. I mean, if I hear, talk about a basket of deplorables, if I hear these 8 rapists and traffickers, and you remember we schemed it. I mean,
if they're here in the country illegally, right, we have no idea who they really are. Right? Let's get rid of them. Right? We have no idea the number of crimes they've committed against other illegal immigrants who are too frightened to report the crimes.
They've made playing cards out of them. But what's really happening is that today a 9-year-old boy and his father, who were picked up, and I think it was the Torrance.
If they're in the country illegally, get rid of them. Why are we paying for them? Why are we subsidizing them? Why are we allowing them to destroy the quality of life in this city, this state, this country? How about putting the interests of your fellow Americans first?
Torrance Public School, next to the Torrance Public School, the student there, they were deported today. And these people who worked, by the way,
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to wager that 9-year-old boy was not a future rocket scientist or doctor.
I have all my notes because I did 7 interviews in the last few hours on all this stuff. But the Ambiance Apparel Company is where.
And so I have many criticisms of this woman, but I recognize people are complicated. She's probably excellent in many different things. All right. She has a long, distinguished journalism career. And just because people say idiotic, disingenuous, deceitful things in one area doesn't mean that they don't have many valuable contributions to make in other areas. So I respect her for conducting all these interviews and putting some effort in to find out truth, even if she does have a particular agenda.
Where it all kicked off. That's where Union leader David Huerta was also arrested on Friday. And people are having a hard time finding out where their dad is or where their mom is. We are getting reporting from the LA Times.
If your dad or your mom are in the country illegally, I don't really care. You have a hard time finding out where your dad and mom is. And for 50 years, we've been hearing, oh, if you deport illegals, then lettuce will go to $15. The crops will rot in the fields, and our whole economy will be devastated. right? Think about that movie, A Day in the Life without Mexicans. Think about how that would just destroy this country. Somehow, the United States of America became the most powerful, the most affluent, the most technologically advanced, right? With high tariffs, we developed the most advanced manufacturing economy, most competitive manufacturing economy. The cheapest, we would produce goods for the lowest prices, and at the same time, we paid the highest prices of anywhere in the world. We did all this when we had a high rate of tariffs. And somehow I think that this country will survive a decrease in the number of illegal immigrants in our midst, sucking off enormous amounts of federal government resources every time they go to an ER, they send their kids to school, they distort our political system because the Census Bureau comes up with the numbers and it counts illegals as residents. And so the Democrats get a 5 to 10, 20 member advantage in the House of Representatives because those states that have a huge number of illegals, right, they will lean left in their politics and they will elect more Democrats to local, state, and national office. Right? It is distorting our political system, our economic system, destroying social trust and social cohesion. But hey, no big deal because, my God, without illegal immigrants, price of lettuce might go to $15.
On people doing stops up in the agricultural area, which is going to lead, Rob, as you know it, to $15 heads of lettuces.
Yeah, she's informing us. She's lecturing us. She's preaching at us. She says she knows better than we do, right? And such a tired line trotted out against people who want to protect the borders of this country. For 50 years, we've been hearing about the astronomical prices if we reduce the number of illegal immigrants in our midst, not talking about the enormous price that we pay in social trust, social cohesion, and in government welfare and education expenditures, right, subsidizing these illegals.
If they go, lettuce, if they go that far.
Yeah, and I know a lot of farmers that voted for Trump, gave him money, and are grateful for what he's trying to do on regulatory and water issues.
And oh my God, did you know that farmers might have to pay their workers more money if we deport illegals? So much more money that regular Americans might be happy to do the job. There are plenty of countries that do not rely on illegal immigrants to do their menial labor. Instead, citizens of the country do that menial labor because it is more highly paid and because they are a fellow citizen. Right, they get to enjoy camaraderie and they are valued by other citizens and they enjoy a higher quality of life. So, oh my God, people with 90 IQs might be able to get higher paying jobs. The lives and the income and the dignity afforded to 90, 95, 100 IQ Americans would rise if we reduce the number of illegals because the wages that they would receive would rise. Right, they might even be able to get married, have a family. Right? There are plenty of jobs that people would not want to do for $12 an hour that they'd be thrilled to do for $20 an hour, right? Or $25 an hour. And if you decrease the supply of illegal labor, wages will go up, particularly for at least educated fellow Americans.
That are going to have an issue. And all it takes is some enforcement, and then the workforce just doesn't show up to work, and you can't.
Yeah, such a tied line, trotted out for decades. And somehow when we've had bits of immigration enforcement, it's never happened. All right. These farmers, these employers will have to pay Americans a little bit more. Oh, that would be the worst thing if our fellow Americans got higher wages, if our government resources were directed towards helping Americans rather than illegals. Right? Wouldn't that be awful if we could afford higher quality healthcare, higher quality education, higher quality life, higher quality public infrastructure, because we no longer have illegals tearing our country down and Americans getting higher wages and having the ability to lead a life of dignity and to get married and have kids, right? These guys hate that. They hate the idea that Americans with willing to do menial labor for $20, $25 an hour, they hate that idea. It just fills them with loathing and disgust. They want a permanent illegal class that they can take advantage of and employ as their nannies and to shine their shoes and to do their menial labor, because God forbid that their fellow Americans might earn a decent wage doing menial labor. which is exactly what would happen if we decreased illegal immigration. But these guys love the large, permanent, illegal underclass who can serve as their nannies and their gardeners.
Can't get the crops in, and yeah, the downstream consequences of that are obvious.
The economic impact.
Yeah, it is obvious. Americans will get higher wages, will have a higher quality of life, will have higher quality government services. And we'll have more social trust, more social cohesion, we'll lead higher quality lives. Everything will get better for Americans. But they're not particularly concerned about the welfare of Americans compared to their ideological dream state, fevered dreams of the beauties, non-existent beauties of diversity and mass immigration.
California is huge, Mark, and you can't. It's not just the people.
Yeah, it's just a huge impact, right? What do you think the average IQ of the illegal immigrant is, right? Probably around 90, and people with an average IQ around 90 are usually going to suck in far more government resources than they pay back in taxes. So why do we want to subsidize this low IQ criminal illegal caste just so that people like Rob and Lisa can have cheap nannies and cheap gardeners?
People who might not have paperwork to be in this country, who are scared to go to their seat.
Oh, they might not have paper. What incredibly dishonest, disingenuous framing. They're in the country illegally. Is the rapist a bad guy simply because he doesn't have the paperwork to show that he's not a rapist? Is the looter and the thug and the torturer and the murderer, are they bad guys simply because they lack paperwork that would get them off a criminal charge?
Seamstress job or their landscaping job or whatever. According to USC Dorn's Life, there are 2 million immigrants in LA County. 2
million immigrants. So if they're legal immigrants, they have nothing to fear. If they're 2 million illegal immigrants, we will enjoy a much higher quality of life if we can get rid of them. Move them out.
Million who live in mixed status households. And they are worried that even if they...
Well, the mixed status legal members of their household can move with them to Honduras, Guatemala, China, wherever you want to go. Just get the hell out of here.
They have papers and go out. I have a housekeeper like this. That if somebody...
Oh, she has a housekeeper like this. So she's saying that either her housekeeper is illegal or members of her housekeeper's household are illegal. All right? She loves this, right? Because she gets that low-wage, permanent underclass to serve Lisa and to do all the menial cleaning work that she doesn't want to have to do. And God forbid we reduce illegal immigration. Right, Lisa would have to pay an American a much higher wage to do this job and to treat that person with the respect that you would give a fellow citizen who is wishing to develop a life of dignity. But this fills her with fear and loathing.
Stops him at the stop sign and says,
right, she wouldn't have the pet class. These guys wouldn't have the pet class to advocate for if we got rid of these illegal immigrants.
I need more paperwork from you, and they take them back home. They might take a...
Yeah, it's just a matter of paperwork. Murder, rape, torture, illegal immigration, right? Every horrible thing you can imagine. Theft. It's all just a matter of paperwork, right? Many people accused of theft, if they simply produce the right paperwork, it will show that they are not guilty of theft. So for her, all these horrible things are just a matter of paperwork. What incredibly dishonest framing. What a absurd war with reality this woman's engaged in. And remember, she bills herself, promotes herself, and is paid as a reporter. Right? She sees herself as a reporter. She's not a left-wing commentator, doesn't see herself this way, but she is promoting a war on reality that is destroying this country.
Abuela away, like no kidding. I mean, because there are grandparents.
Yeah, if Abuela is in the country illegally, she is, in all likelihood, a massive drain on this country, people like her, destroying social trust, social cohesion, driving up housing, right, diminishing trust between Americans because we have nothing in common with each other. Right, let's get that illegal Abuela the hell out of here, even if it means that Lisa might have to pay an American to clean her toilet, even if Lisa has to pay her house worker a little bit more money and perhaps treat that person with a little bit more respect.
Parents who don't have paperwork, or, you know, an uncle or an aunt or whatever, even if everybody else does.
Oh, it's just all a matter of paperwork. Well, why don't you have the courage of your convictions? Why don't you just say, hey, murderers just simply lack the right paperwork. Massive fraudsters, they simply lack the right paperwork. Why don't you call these people undocumented killers, undocumented shoppers, right? Undocumented financial entrepreneurs who are out there swindling tens of millions of dollars, right? They're just undocumented entrepreneurs. She would never use that language with any other category. Such dishonest framing.
There are 2 million of those mixed status households in the county, 1 million in the city of LA. So what's happening is that other people are staying home even if they have papers. The impact on not just the...
So people are in the country legally are staying home. I don't buy it. I do not buy it. Right? She's going to give a sob story here about how people are in the country illegally, who are in the country legally, right? Legal residents are staying home because they're just so afraid that an illegal member of their household will be caught.
Construction guy who can't get a drywaller. But what about the woman who's an accountant, or the man who's a whatever he is, a nurse practitioner, and they're waiting on their nanny, and their nanny doesn't come because she's uncomfortable, leaving the valley and going to...
Oh my God, they might need to pay an American nanny a little bit more money. Some teenage kids might get to hold down jobs. Some of their fellow Americans might get to lead a life of dignity. And so instead of paying the nanny $12 an hour, my God, you might have to pay the nanny $20 an hour and treat her with more respect. And this is just a horrifying prospect for this pro-immigration crowd who loves this permanent class of illegals who they can exploit.
To work. We've lost half of our port jobs already because of tariffs. It was just reported in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, God, Trump's tariffs have just been devastating. All right, we have tens of millions of unemployed, and inflation's 150%, and the whole country is falling apart because of Trump's tariffs.
And our hospitality, as you know, Rob, is all the...
Yeah, the hospitality, right? The LA City Council passed a law that everyone in the hospitality industry, all the janitors, have to get a minimum wage of $30 an hour. Right? And many of them probably illegal.
Reservations are getting canceled because people are really uncomfortable about traveling here and worried about if they're going to get...
Simply not true. We don't have a massive decrease in tourism or the travel of people in the country legally to Los Angeles. Right? She's just spinning these delusional stories.
Even if they haven't done anything wrong, they're Canadians and Germans who have been detained for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, she wants us to believe that there are just thousands of Canadians and Germans who are completely legal, completely law-abiding, and they're just being detained. Right? I call bullshit. I call bullshit, lady. You are a spinner of falsehoods. Yeah, there may be 17, right? God forbid. There aren't thousands of these cases.
And only to find out, well, okay, now you can go, but who wants to do that, So it's the economic...
Yeah, if you follow the law, you don't have anything to worry about here with regard to Trump's immigration enforcement. But yeah, if you want to live a life of criminality, coming into this country illegally and staying here illegally and sucking off the system illegally, then you have reason to feel anxiety.
Economic pile-on for California is going to be big, and Newsom should be talking about that.
Yeah, and he did a little bit in the address last night, but you're right, it's not as front and center as it might be. Rob, I normally am against hypotheticals, but I want to give you one. What if the Speaker of the United States House was still a Californian? What do you think he'd be saying about all this?
I think he'd be publicly what he'd be saying is what he would need.
Or she.
Yeah, so Rob and Lisa believe that Republicans privately hate Donald Trump and privately agree with them, and they're privately part of their reality community, but they're just too scared by Donald Trump to say the truth.
I mean specifically Kevin McCarthy.
You mean Kevin?
I know.
He'd be saying what he needed to support his conference and support Dear Leader, but I think privately there would be a lot of urgent caution. I alluded to Valadeo. This, look, it's it's only a few seats. There are enough seats out there where this could be the defining issue.
Yeah.
Ballard spoke out in Florida, I believe, as well. It's like you really got to be careful.
Oh, God forbid that Republicans do something brave, and even possibly there might be a downside to doing something brave. Wouldn't that be awful? I mean, God forbid. This supposedly is the worst thing in the world. Right, a little bit of common sense on Adam Carolla.
Engage, but when people are saying, "Oh, the escalation," it's getting to a point where the escalation is them not engaging the rioters because it's just giving them this sense of we can do whatever.
Right. This is the point that Lisa didn't think about. Right. Kent State, right? National Guard killed 4 students. How many people would have been dead if the rioters were allowed to operate without any check? And she brings up the police and the military and the Watts riots killing 30 people. Well, how many people would be dead if the police and the military didn't use deadly force to put down the Watts riots?
The F we want. And as you can see on screen, this is the result. Bars are being broken into, gas stations, parking lot kiosks burning down. So it's really getting out of control. And for all the people that are saying, well, this is just downtown LA, this isn't widespread. It's like, listen, LA is a big place. Most people in LA were having a normal Sunday, but that has nothing to do with the havoc and the terror that the people and the citizens of downtown LA and adjacent cities are experiencing.
Yeah. Have you been sick? Right. Has your back gone out? Right. Have you become more vulnerable? All right. When you're strong and connected and rich and powerful, you're not going to fear this disorder. But when you're weak, when you're vulnerable, when, say, your back goes out on you, and yet you have to navigate public transport, public spaces, and you have to get to work, you're living paycheck to paycheck, right? And not being able to get to work could mean that you lose your apartment, right?
I mean, the sad thing is a show of force is really what these people need, because they will just do as much as we let them do. And
people basically treat you how you train them to, and thugs and criminals and murderers and torturers and rapists, they will do as much as they can get away with. We get to choose how much crime we have, how much murder we have, how much raping and thuggery and looting and torture we have by how much and how long we punish these bad guys.
You know, it's now gone weird with the Democratic politicians that have to sort of take their side. I mean, I basically said, look, I just spent 4 years being lectured by Democrats that there was no National Guard for January 6th, and Trump should have dispatched a National Guard because that would have prevented all this. Now they don't want the National Guard here because they're incendiary. Like, is the National Guard good or bad, bitch? Like, which is it? Which is it? It could have prevented the greatest attack since Pearl Harbor, which, by the way, Pelosi should have okayed the National Guard, and Miriam Bowser should have okayed the National Guard 3 days ahead when they got the information that we conveniently forgot about, but okay. But is the National Guard good or bad? And the answer is, well, it's good when we can use it for our argument, then bad when we can use it for a different argument. Also, a bunch of guys in uniforms with weapons, I would argue, does not incite the crowd. It tends to clean up the crowd. And also, it's not incendiary. Okay, let's just do your math. Let's do the math. Okay, for the sake of argument, there's 500 cops. All right. Or for the sake of argument, there's 200 cops. Okay. And then somebody says, how about we get another 500 National Guardsmen in here? And then you go, well, that would inflame the situation and agitate the people. Okay. Well, according to your math, if we got rid of the 200 cops, the whole thing would go away. Because if 200 men in uniform is causing some agitation and 1,000 men in uniform is going to make them spin out, well, then why don't we get rid of the 200 men in uniform and it would all go away, right? Or would it get worse? And it would get worse. Now shut up. Sorry, Aldo.
That's what they keep saying, too. They keep saying, well, the LAPD, they can handle riots. They've handled the biggest riots in the country for the history of our country and the history of our nation. Well, you can't have it both ways. Either we need the National Guard, or we need some sort of external force to come in and aid them, or the LAPD can handle it themselves. But by the looks of it, they can't. So you got to choose one or the other. You can't just say we don't want help and then continue letting the rioters just run amok on the streets. You either got to handle it or you got to accept help. But not accepting help, I feel like, is unacceptable.
Yeah, and you were talking about, some of your colleagues being doxxed and, covering your face and so on and so forth. And Hakeem Jeffries made this asinine statement a couple days ago about ICE not showing their faces and stuff. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing. I think I guess Trump just baits them into taking super retarded stances. We capture it all on film, and then next time there's an election, we're just going to roll out all you guys saying in color and in digital copies a bunch of insane anti-American stuff. I guess that's what he's doing. I think he's baiting them.
He's the king at it. He's the master, if you want to put it that way.
Well, let's play devil's advocate here for a second, because I've been in Los Angeles my whole life. I work construction a lot of my life, and so you work with Hispanic workers. I mean, you work with dudes who work, who come here to work. I never knew which guys were legal, which guys were illegal. The guys I worked with were always just hardworking dudes. And they got along and they were fine and they had enough English and they were this they're just hardworking construction dudes with families and stuff like that. So,
yeah, and when they get hurt, right, or when they have kids who need an education and they're in the country illegally, all right, they take out far more in government resources than they pay in through their taxes.
Obviously, the Democratic argument is this is Trump just sort of, engaging and liberating his authoritarian impulses, and he's always wanted to do this.
But that's not the argument I'm making. There's a middle ground here, which is that Trump is going too far because he doesn't have the historical grounding, or maybe doesn't think through some of these things in terms of the precedent. I'm not going into the police state argument. I think the Democrats hurt themselves when they make that argument. That doesn't mean that everything Trump does could be excused because the Democrats use the wrong argument to object to it.
No. But I'm saying, and you mentioned this, Carl, the learning of, hey, let's not have a repeat of 1992 post Rodney King, right? And I guess the argument would be Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, who are sitting there saying everything's fine. There's nothing going on. It was like, meanwhile, we're watching this stuff, video clips of this stuff coming out of Los Angeles, and it didn't look like all was fine. Yeah. And so that's when I think Trump decided to act.
All right. Well, guys,
criticize him if you want.
I'm going to talk to Susan Crabtree, our national correspondent, who's welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Thunberg, I guess is the right way to say it. And some humanitarian aid was intercepted by Israeli forces. Thunberg says she was kidnapped by the Israeli government, which responded by labeling the boat a selfie yacht and deported her. Carl, this is part of an international effort called the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. What do you make of Greta, and what do you make of the Israeli response?
Well, I think Greta Thunberg is a dilettante, but I have the IDF or whoever it was in Netanyahu's government who came up with the selfie yacht thing. Once you heard that, you couldn't not think of it. And I thought, this is really what Trumpism is. It's no coherent political philosophy. It's labeling your opponents, especially the worst among your opponents, the most performative and superficial of your opponents, with a nickname that nobody can ever unhear.
That is an excellent summary of Trumpism.
Careful with these things right now. Is this what you really want to potentially cash in the House on?
Yeah, I want to show you guys one more piece of tape, and then I want to bring you folks. Center has been Newsom and Trump, and they're back and forth. The mayor of Los Angeles, and of course, has least per influential position. But nonetheless, Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, has had some role here, and of course, she is the face of the curfew. Here's Karen Bass, number 10.
Why is she imposing a curfew if everything's just peachy?
Blaming ICE for the problems that have occurred. Number 10.
A week ago, everything was peaceful in the city of Los Angeles and in all of the representatives behind me in their cities as well. Things began to be difficult on Friday when raids took place, and it's important that I begin there because that is the cause of the problems that have happened in the city of Los Angeles and other cities. This was this was provoked by the White House. The reason why, we don't know.
So Lisa, she was not given very high marks for the aftermath of the fires. How visible has she been the last 5 days? And what do you think her posture is towards ending this?
I think her posture is trust the police and trust the LA County sheriffs. Again, that's not her, that's a county job, but she's saying trust the police organizations that are trained in this sort of civil unrest, as opposed to bringing in any sort of military units. I think that's what she's primarily saying. And look, I don't want anybody surprised that there were raids. I mean, right, Rob? I mean, Trump has been saying that there were going to be workplace raids and that, yes, he emphasized the criminals, but we all knew that there were going to be, whether it was poultry, businesses in the Midwest or, pork farms or whatever. There are other places where we expected these raids to happen. Again, the amount of people that came out and protested the raids, and they were, and there was righteous indignation. I get it. But they swelled really quickly because of social media, right? But I don't think that the cops were overwhelmed. I think they would have been fine. I mean, I think
the LAPD chief says that they were overwhelmed, but she knows better than the LAPD chief. She knows better than the cops. Right? She says the cops are fine. The cops say we were overwhelmed. We were overextended. We didn't have enough resources to deal with this. But she knows better.
Get right, Rob? Don't you agree?
I think so. They've
been
right. Yeah, both these guys say that, hey, they know better than the cops.
They've been quoted at times and on camera at times saying they're not fine.
Right. The LAPD chief said we're not fine, but Lisa and Rob, they know better.
Well,
they themselves have said that during parts of the 5 days. They said they are overwhelmed.
Sunday night, the LAPD police chief said that, but Lisa and Rob want to lie about that and deliberately say the very opposite of what the LAPD chief said. He said we're not fine.
But I've heard others, including Jim McDonald, saying, we got this. We're trained for this.
Yeah, the LAPD chief, Jim McDonald, said we're overwhelmed. We're overstretched. We need resources. We need help. Right. So she's lying about what he said.
I mean, let's face it. Would the Marines get 2 hours of civil unrest training before they were deployed? Something like that.
It takes LAPD and the SO and the CHP a day or two to get ready for these things. So they don't respond well in the first 24, 48 hours. But once they reallocate everything, then they're fine. But but also listen to what I just said, right? It's kind of like, well, who's guarding the rest of the city? I mean, it's drawing resources from their primary functions to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if the Guard hadn't become a political football with Trump federalizing it, I assume it's plausible that
right. The Trump would have been the National Guard would have been just fine as long as it wasn't used by Donald Trump.
Thank you. So I am in Sydney, Australia, and I live in Texas as well. So I have dual citizenship. And so I've gotten to see immigration from both, inside Texas, so I can't claim to know anything about California, and Sydney.
Australia doesn't have an illegal immigration problem because it's an island and it has control over who comes to the country. And if you come to Australia illegally, you'll never be allowed to in Australia, right? You'll not be allowed to stay. You'll never be allowed to come back and visit.
Australia. But my question is, what about where's the talk of meaningful?
There's been an incentive structure, like most incentive structures in our politics, that is bad, which is don't fix this. And so the current administration has demagogued on the issue. I think
Donald Trump, he's demagoguing on the issue that we need to stop illegal immigration and we need to deport illegals. That's demagoguery.
It'll be interesting analysis though if they if they extend these raids to workplaces, and there's the economic effect and these.
Oh my God! So illegals, and you find them at a workplace and you deport them. What are we going to do without those 145 IQ drywallers?
Families are getting torn apart. That in the aftermath down the road.
Right. You choose to marry or shack up with illegals. Right. I don't really care that your family gets torn apart. Like, screw you for subsidizing and protecting illegals.
It still doesn't bring us back to refocusing on some solutions. Look, the reality is, of course, there are undocumented immigrants here who would be documented if we had just.
Right. This is a Republican, right? A National Review Republican who doesn't like to use illegal immigrant. He's talking about undocumented immigrants, like undocumented shoppers who are looting and undocumented killers who are murderers and undocumented rapists. If only they just had the documents, then they'd be fine.
Giving them a sensible system to work within to be here.
Yeah, a sensible system so that we can have an indentured servant class who will do my manual labor at a very inexpensive rate so I don't have to pay a fair dinkum regular American citizen a dignified wage. Right, that's what he wants, this permanent indentured underclass to serve him and his ilk, right, to minister to their menial needs.
And provide labor that's essential to our economy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, because labor, right? This is the argument he's making. Labor that is essential to our economy will not be done if we deport illegals. But by definition, if the labor is essential, right, and illegals are deported, Americans will step up because those who need that labor will have to find a price that Americans will be willing to pay. Right. This woman, Lisa, she wants this permanent indentured underclass.
There are, but they didn't fix the system. You know, look, we used to have the Bracero programs. There could be, you know, we should have a meaningful guest worker program, right? Because
why not have Americans work? Why not take care of your fellow American?
Right. I don't know a kid that went to high school with my kid who's going to go pick strawberries bending over in the hot sun for $10 an hour.
I went back to Australia after I graduated from 12th grade, and I eventually secured a contract where I was earning about $20, $25 an hour. Came back to California. I couldn't find any job that paid over $4 an hour because we had so much migration to California. And I was working 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week in 105, 110 degree temperatures in the Sacramento area, working in construction, all right, for $4 an hour, right, when I was 19, when I was 20. So plenty of people are willing to do it. Right now, instead of getting paid $10 an hour, they might need to get paid 18 or 20, right? There is a number, $20 an hour. How many American high school kids would be willing to work outside in the hot sun for $20 an hour or $25 an hour? I don't think it's quite so few, right? A lot more American kids would be working. In Australia, I know, because in Australia, kids work. Kids make $18, $20 an hour picking mangoes and doing this menial labor for which she has so much contempt that she wants this imported indentured underclass to do it, right? Regular Australians do this labor, right? In countries all over the world, regular citizens do this kind of labor, and the laborers are treated with dignity and respect because they are their fellow citizen, and they get a good, solid living wage because they don't have to compete against a bunch of illegals.
Won't abandon law enforcement. If you're looking for a repeat of 2020, I'm sorry to say your dream is as dead as George Floyd. You don't know which George Floyd I mean. Even legal immigrants support Trump. Take it away, Harry.
Immigrant voters, foreign-born voters, have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40-point shift to the right among immigrant voters. Republicans now lead on this issue by 8 points over Democrats.
It makes sense. If you waited your turn, why would you be happy about a bunch of jerks cutting the line? So why are the Dems and the media shocked by this? Well, because unlike the left, immigrants don't shout their beliefs every time there's a break in conversation. Hell, I rarely even flex my muscles unless it's a conversation about my muscles. But the left lives in a bubble where they're at ease telling you their worst opinions, assuming the silence it causes is affirmation. It's not. So when their assumptions get shellacked, they're as shocked as Larry Kudlow when I electrocute his nipples. Hey, I wouldn't do it if he didn't ask. So to us, the riots are just a geographic version of Joe Biden. And that you see with your own eyes what's going on, and the left tells you you're nuts for seeing it. And that preserves their escalation hoax. You know, that by responding to riots, you escalate them. No, we got years of evidence proving otherwise. If you don't respond to the riots, you get days, weeks, even months of more rioting. It never stops because lawlessness leads to more.
I loved Portland. I remember visiting Portland in 2001. I just fell in love with this peaceful, beautiful, safe, clean downtown Portland. And it has been trashed and tens of millions of dollars worth of damage because they allowed the riots to go on there day in, day out, day in, day out. Well over $1 billion worth of economic damage, quality of life destroyed for tens of thousands of people in Portland because they simply allowed the riots to run largely unchecked.
or lawlessness. So the riots aren't a protest against authoritarianism, they're a protest against order. Once you conflate order with authoritarianism, you get chaos and destruction. So if restoring order is evil, then the Dems are now the party of disorder. Turns out the only system they had was wokeism, and it rotted any basic principles the party had to begin with, which is why, like Gavin himself, they're left looking at 2028's hopes going up in flames. And this time, no one is going to help them put it out. Let's welcome tonight's guest. Good evening, everyone. So after her selfie boat was intercepted, aging spinster Greta Thunberg claims Israel kidnapped her. But that would be the first kidnapping in history where the kidnappers wanted to cut off their own ears. Elon Musk has apologized to Donald Trump, tweeting that he regrets some of his posts and that they went too far. As a token of regret, he's offering to impregnate a woman of Trump's choice. Still harboring a grudge, though, Trump picked this. Yeah, good luck finding that. I mean, because she's gone. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass is warning rioters that the damage is so significant they won't be able to host World Cup soccer. I know. Finally, an upside to rioting. Bass also instituted an 8 p.m. curfew for Los Angeles. So everyone at Nickelodeon, get your fondling done by 7:55. Meanwhile, last night, the LA rioters destroyed a popular sushi restaurant. Wow. First ice, and now rice. It's a rhyme. President Trump said the protesters are no longer allowed to wear masks unless they're a solid 4 or lower.
Yes.
So you're safe, Taylor Swift. She's a 6. Based on more than 40,000 Yelp reviews, In-N-Out Burger has the best French fries in the country. To be fair, though, all 40,000 reviews came from the same guy. Oh, this is good. Oh, terrible story. Billy Joel revealed he once drank a bottle of Lemon Pledge to kill himself. But after throwing it up, his depression lifted when he noticed the floor was clean and lemony fresh. That's a good one. And finally, according to scientists, humpback whales are trying to send messages to humans. Yeah, and it turns out they even have their own TV show. Oh, you saw it coming. You saw it coming. All right. So as LA implodes, the Dems are trying to unwoke themselves. Politico calls it the Great Unwokening, a shift to the center as candidates try to clean their image ahead of a potential 2028 run. It's sort of like how Amber Heard doesn't poop on anything when she's in a courtroom. Their so-called evidence? Maryland Governor Wes Moore vetoed a reparations bill. Mayor Pete scrubbed his pronouns from social media. And before watching rioters torch his state, Gavin Newsom called it unfair to allow trans athletes in women's sports. But watching them try to rid themselves of woke is like watching a killer trying to wipe down the crime scene. But how can Dems do it if they still take the side of the assholes? While his city crumbled, Newsom ripped Trump's decision to deploy troops to quell the riots, calling it a brazen abuse of power. With that logic, the firefighters who put out the Palisades fires are tyrants as well. He claimed, what we're witnessing is not law enforcement, it's authoritarianism. Well, at this point, can someone get him and the Democrats a dictionary? One that's not written by a retard? But fellow Dems are marching behind him with bricks in hand. Nancy compared Trump's decision to, of course, Jan 6th.
In a bipartisan way, on January 6th, with violence against the Constitution, against the Congress, and against the United States Capitol, we begged the President of the United States to send in the National Guard. He would not do it.
That statement is about as authentic as Dylan Mulvaney's landing strip. I don't know if she owned an airport. She owned an airport. Fact is, Pelosi held the Guard back, so Jan 6 could be more chaotic and uglier, which it was. But Republicans are different. Yes, if we held back the National Guard, LA would burn to the ground, and perhaps there'd never be another liberal governor or mayor again. But we put people before politics. The Dems, however, just keep the gaslighting train rolling. Right, Maxine?
Nobody was shot. Nobody was killed. Get it in your head. Don't think that somehow, because they called out the National Guard, there was violence. There was no violence. I was on the street. I know.
Sorry, Maxine. Something was indeed shot and killed, and it landed on your head. Love her. But she wasn't the only violence denier.
The vast majority of protesters have been peaceful. There are always a few bad actors. Local law enforcement has said they can handle the protests. It's no different than when a team wins a national championship and people get overexcited and they overturn vehicles and light them on fire.
All right, the vast number of whatever horrible army you want to bring up, whether it's communists or the Nazis, right? Most of the time, members of the army were mostly peaceful, right? It was only a minority of the time that they were killing people.
Please. Even Philadelphia Eagles fans are like, we only destroy things for a few hours. So while Dems try to win back voters, they expand their opposition by labeling all law enforcement action as authoritarian. Pretty soon, their party will consist of Hamas, Antifa, and cat ladies. If a jeweler calls the cops to protect his store, the Dems will think, well, he's the problem. Like they did with pro-Hamas campus protests, BLM riots, and Daniel Penny. The only difference, Trump won't abandon law enforcement. If you're looking for a repeat of 2020, I'm sorry to say your dream is as dead as George Floyd. You don't know which George Floyd I mean.
Okay, so we got a spicy rant here, I understand, from Mr. Adam Carolla.
Who live in parts unknown. They think, oh, Los Angeles is burning or something like that. Los Angeles is big and sprawling, and there's places where you would have no idea there were even any unrest whatsoever. There are places in Los Angeles where you wouldn't think black people were invented yet. Certain places, safe places, good. I mean, different places. But you can go to La Cañada, you can go to parts of Orange County, you know, like, and all you don't see any graffiti. You don't see anything. You just see nice people walking their dogs.
We call it Los Angeles as a collective, right? But the reality is much different.
Right. What you guys are seeing on TV around the country is downtown L.A. It's the stretch of the 110 freeway that goes through downtown. People blocking.
The 101, yeah.
101. Yeah, they keep saying the 101, but I think they're talking about the 110 through downtown.
There's a connector.
Yeah, it's all in the same place. All right, first things first. My attack crows would break up that fucking group of crazed Mexicans and sympathetic white people in a millisecond. You're stopping the freeway. It is hard enough. I had a friend, we're over on the Valley. She had to get to LAX for like a flight from the Valley like yesterday at like 7. No can do. You're fucking up people's lives. My crows, done. Broken up. Number one. Number two, as I think about it, it pretty much works this way in life. All what the cops have is like the threat of lethality. They don't have the numbers. The crowd has the numbers. So there's 1,000 people marching or rioting or doing whatever, but there's only 100 cops. But the cops have guns. And there's the threat of you getting shot or something painful, negative, maybe causing death or severe injury from the small group. So if you want to a guy can hold up a bank because there could be 30 people in the bank and one guy can hold up the bank, but because he's got a gun.
Yes.
But if everyone in the bank knows he can't use that gun, no more bank robbery. Mayhem,
Good
go
metaphor.
kick that guy's ass. Well, he's got a gun, but he can't use it. All right, well, now we know.
Nice sweet double leg into the money pile.
Right. So, the money pile. I don't know if you've been in a bank in a while.
I haven't.
But here's the point. Once the word gets out that the cops cannot use their guns, then it just becomes numbers.
And think of the poor Waymos.
Oh, my God. The robot cars always suffer. It's like divorce.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is now one guy with a gun can't rob a bank because there's 30 people in the bank and they'll just take him down. Now it's going to take 31 people to rob a bank because there's 30 people in the bank. So the cops are overwhelmed now because in the past there'd be 100 cops and 1,000 riders and someone would go Kent State and shoot somebody on a lawn and people would start running. But they're now walking up to the cops and spitting at them, calling them Nazis, which means there's zero fear. And when there's zero fear, now you need numbers. That's the way it works.
Well, I just connected some dots right now in my head that you may be getting your wish come true for a murder of crows to take everybody out because eventually they're going to have little tiny drones and they already have long-range acoustic devices that shoot sound waves at protest. So all your things are coming to fruition.
Okay, let's get a little bit more from two-way.
You know what I mean?
Actually, I will say, like living in Texas in the summer, there's a lot of jobs I would take in Minnesota to be somewhere else. So I do know people, like I see that all the time here in Australia, where you've got people that are on backpacker travel visas.
And Australia doesn't have illegal immigration, so it's the best place in the world for the average bloke. All right, the people who come here on immigration visas and pick and do manual labor in Australia, they get a decent wage, right? Which Lisa and Rob hate. They hate the idea of Americans having a life of dignity and getting paid a decent wage. If only the subservient perennial underclass skips its place, what a disaster that would be. Like, God forbid that we should pay Americans a decent wage. Let's just keep this servant class, working for us cheap.
And Australia is like, hey, we'll give you another 6 months here in the country if you go pick our, strawberries. And so
there's absolutely no reason why Americans cannot pick strawberries. Americans would be thrilled to pick strawberries if they were paid well enough. But Rob and Lisa want to keep a ton of illegals in this country, right? So regular Americans can't have a dignified living doing farm work.
Really? German engineering students out there, in Queens.
You have Australians picking strawberries. You have Australians picking mangoes. You have tons of Australians doing farm work. This is the norm in most countries that don't have illegal immigration. Their citizens do this work, this menial work, for which they get a dignified wage. And that's what we could have in this country if we simply dialed back the immigration.
Queensland picking strawberries. So, there's things that you can do. And quite frankly,
San Joaquin Valley. To spend a summer in Kern County. I started my reporting career in Bakersfield. You couldn't pay me enough. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about picking in the fields, but these are real.
I worked in Sacramento in construction where the temperature was over 100 degrees for like 50 days in a row. And I did it for $4 an hour. And I kind of liked it. And Americans would do this kind of work if they are allowed to make a dignified wage. And they're only going to get that if we dial back the immigration.
The conditions there are abhorrent. That the housing
abhorrent, really. There's
the wages and everything else. Look, if it had been possible to get a bunch of high school kids to go pick, we're picking food for America right here. There's just not,
Seriously, you don't think high school kids do this all over the world? They would do it in America too, if we didn't have illegal immigration, so that the high school kids could get a dignified wage, right? High school kids working McDonald's for minimum wage. You don't think that they would do this outside work for, say, $5 extra an hour?
Well, if you want those conditions to improve, and look, you hear stories here in Australia as well, but I would say that, we have the ability to improve our technology. We have the ability, and that
they're just not doing it. They're not doing it.
That's right.
No.
Leslie, thank you. Appreciate it.
Into the community and conduct these raids. And when they conduct these raids, they are going to.
Lisa, and thank you for being part of Two-Way.
Thanks for inviting me in. I'm in Peoria, Illinois. And, I think one thing that's missing in the coverage of the story is these raids are taking place because California made a policy choice. They refuse to honor ICE detainers for criminal illegals. This forces ICE to go into the community.
Right. If American farmers have to pay farm workers twice as much money, right, that's not going to increase produce by 100%. Right. Wages only account for a tiny portion for the price of lettuce and vegetables and fruit. All right. So if Americans got a dignified wage to do farm work, the price of produce would go up perhaps 5%, perhaps 10%.
Community and conduct these raids. And when they conduct these raids, they are going to arrest every illegal they encounter. And the reason for that is the guy who launched the Molotov cocktails at the Jewish parade in Boulder was legal right up until that point. And if you were in the country illegally.
Yeah, he was in the country illegally, and then the Biden administration gave him legality despite his illegal presence in this country.
And to get to the other point, this constant talk about we need a path to citizenship, we need reform. No, we need the border sealed, every single illegal alien deported and barred from ever returning unless they self-deport. Then we can talk about reform. Until then, we're left with Lisa talking about repeating the Democrats in 1860, but who will pick all the cotton?
He's absolutely right. This is the essence of what Lisa's doing, Rob Sussman's doing. All right, all those who fight immigration, they are repeating the Democrats' argument from the 1860s. If we stop slavery, then who's going to pick the cotton? Right? If we don't have this illegal underclass, right, who's going to do manual labor for us at a cheap rate?
Argument. It's disgusting that she's advocating for a permanent underclass of illegal laborers to pick her strawberries and to be her abuela. It's disgusting.
And she's going to claim, oh no, I don't advocate for any of this. Right? Did you hear earlier? Of course she advocates this.
Advocating.
Mark, hold on. First of all, disgusting.
And I can tell you that there are people who are doing jobs who are here without paperwork.
They're illegal immigrants. And to describe them as they just lack paperwork is such an inherently dishonest framing that shows she's at war with reality, because she has such a loathing for normality, for normal immigration enforcement, for the normal rule of law, that she has to make an absolute fool of herself. And why does she do it? Because it is the price for her high status position. Right? She gets to hobnob with high status people and have a high status position in life because she is willing to say things that are so at odds with reality, that are so duplicitous, so dishonest, so disingenuous, right? So ridiculous that a normal person would feel absolutely humiliated spewing the stuff that she spews. But that's the price for her high status job.
And one of the reasons they are crossing the border and taking these jobs, and yes, they're here illegally, they are. But one of the reasons they're doing it is that those farmers and ranchers, Rob, you know him, Mark, you know him, we've covered them for years up in the valley. They can't afford to hire American citizens.
Yeah, of course they can. They just have to pay them a few dollars more. But it's so handy to have this subservient pet class to clean your toilets at a low rate.
The way the system is set up now to do that ag work.
Mark, hold on.
I'm not advocating for it. I'm not saying what should be.
She's essentially saying, who's going to pick our cotton? If we get rid of slavery, if we get rid of this indentured class, then heck, who's going to pick our cotton, guys? Right? He's absolutely right. This is the anti-immigration restrictionist argument. If we do away with this illegal class, if we do away with this indentured servitude class, then